The last few major Android releases, Android 13, 14, 15, have been maybe a little bit underwhelming for a lot of the broader public, as big changes are harder and harder to come by. After all, we are in the 15th generation of Android. Things are pretty much settled. What Android is going to be is pretty much settled. We are basically just polishing, refining, adding a few things here or there. But the days of radical changes from version to version are probably well and truly behind us. Even still, I believe that we are in the midst of one of the most interesting times for Android. Kind of an inflection point as far as I can see. And I think I can illustrate this by looking at a couple of comments that I've received in the last couple of days. And let me be clear, I'm not picking on these commenters at all. They are simply sharing a perspective that many people have shared. I'm only going to show a couple of comments, but they are representative of comments that I get all the time. This first one coming from SpyPlane8. Isn't it strange knowing that OnePlus and Samsung are actually using an operating system that is developed by Google, and they are the ones that have far more options? Wouldn't you think the creators of the actual operating system would have the most options? Here's another one from commenter Random Characters. For a company that is known for good software, in my opinion, the software is kind of lacking. They're talking about the Pixel 9 series of devices. For an OS, it is oftentimes touted as, quote, you can tune everything how you like it, end quote. It's very disappointing to have a 4-column wide widget that even if it only takes up 2 columns in width, it still blocks the whole row. As someone who has spent an inordinate amount of time talking about Samsung phones like the Z Fold series, talking about the OnePlus Open, and then talking about Pixel phones, I see comments like this all the time. People talking about how Google Pixel phones don't have as many options, don't have as many features, don't have as much raw customization as these other devices might have, and that they have complaints about that. Their expectation is Google makes Android, therefore they should have the most Android stuff. And Android stuff, by definition, is lots of customization, lots of tweaking, lots of settings, lots of features. For most people, or at least a lot of people, maybe most is not right, but for a lot of people, Android is virtually synonymous with those things. Those are the core tenets of what makes Android, and yet we are watching in real time Google with their Pixel phones diverge from that original, maybe you would call it mission, and go an entirely different way. Let me kind of tell you what I mean by that. When I talk about devices like the Pixel Fold, or in this instance, the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, one of the comments that I get most often, one of the biggest complaints about this device, is that when you do split screen multitasking, you can only have 2 apps on screen at a time. Devices like the Z Fold 6 or the OnePlus Open can do more than that. They can do 3 different things, 3 different applications in split screen. They both do it in different ways, but they can both do it. They can both do more than the Pixel Fold. The device made by Google can do less than those other devices. Let me turn your attention to this post on the Android Developers YouTube channel. We're sitting at about 5 minutes and 16 seconds, and they threw this graphic on screen. Now, they're talking about the original Pixel Fold here, but they said 47% of Pixel Fold users use split screen mode. Now, I made a whole video talking about this because it really surprised me that it was that low of a number. In my mind, people that are buying folding phones are buying them in large part to do split screen multitasking, yet not even half of those people who own it are apparently doing that. So for me, the follow-up question that this begs for is, what percentage of Pixel Fold users would use a 3rd app in split screen? I know for me, I almost never use a 3rd app when it's available to me. We would have to assume that it's lower than 47%. My intuition, my gut, which might be wrong, tells me it's probably a really, really low number. But here's the thing, that doesn't mean that that number would be the same on Pixel Fold users versus Z Fold users. It is entirely possible that Z Fold users split screen more than Pixel Fold users, and that they use 3 apps more than Pixel Fold users hypothetically would. There is a divergence between Pixel users and Samsung users, and you could throw OnePlus users into that, or many other OEMs. We're going to use Samsung as sort of our substitute maybe for all of those other brands. They're just going to be representative of the opposite of what Google is doing. They are both pursuing very different things, and importantly, very different customers. This might be the best way to put it. Samsung is going for, and again, Samsung being representative of many different OEMs. I'm just going to say Samsung, so I'm not having to say a whole bunch of OEMs. Samsung is going after Android users. Well, who's Google going after? Who is Google trying to target with the Pixel phones as of late? Let's take a look at this page here, Stat Counter. We're looking at mobile vendor market share in North America. Again, talked about this in its own video. I'm going to be brief. What you see here from September to October is Google's market share reaching into the double digits for the first time ever. And at the exact same time, this could be correlation, not causation. These things may be unrelated. But just hear me out here. At the exact same time, Apple's market share dropped from 55% to 41%. They lost market share at the exact same time that Google is gaining market share. Over the last couple of months, I have seen more buzz about iPhone users switching to the Pixel 9 than I have ever seen about any other phone. Okay, now this is anecdotal. Okay, this is just posts on social media. But I have seen a lot of talk about this. And one of the things that people are saying the most is, wow, I can't believe how easy it was to switch from iPhone to the Pixel 9. It was a very seamless process. This feels a bit familiar to me. This is what Google is absolutely trying to accomplish. Google is absolutely doing everything within their power to be the default answer to the question, I'm an iPhone user, which Android phone should I use? Again, back to this chart. Why would you try to compete with Samsung doing what Samsung does when Apple has such a massive chunk of the market and Samsung is using your operating system and a lot of your software? You would want to go after Apple's users, not Samsung's, and that is absolutely what Google is doing with their recent Pixel 9 devices. I mean, look at the thing. You cannot look at this phone and tell me that it doesn't look a bit like an iPhone, right? Like, I do think that it's maybe a little bit overblown. I saw people saying this was straight up an iPhone clone. And I think that if you see this phone from the back, no one's going to look at this and be like, oh, is that the new iPhone? That camera bump is still very, very distinctly Google, but the side rails being flat, this back side, just in general, the way that the front of it even looks, it doesn't have the giant notch or the island, I guess is what they're calling it now. But guys, this is meant to be a device that an iPhone user is going to look at and think, yeah, I could see myself using that. That does look very similar to what I'm used to carrying. And while this might sound condescending, I absolutely do not mean it this way at all. The software on Pixel devices, I believe, is meant to be a bit simpler. It's meant to be a software suite that's not going to overwhelm people who might be switching from the iPhone. They're going to give you exactly what they think that you need, and that's an important factor about this. Exactly what they think that you need. Very iPhone, very Apple-like. They're just going to say, this is what we think is best, and this is what we're going to give you, nothing more and nothing less. Let's jump into something like the customization of this thing. Yeah, you can absolutely customize these things, but it's a very sort of guided, very sort of simple experience. If we go to our lock screen, there's not much to it, guys. We're just kind of changing our clock. And, you can make it look different, and that's cool, but it's not a lot. You've got cool things like AI wallpapers, but guess what? Whenever you go to make the AI wallpaper, it's a guided experience. And yes, I know Samsung has this as well, but it's literally from Google. Like, it's Google's AI wallpaper thing that Samsung is using. So I think that the point still stands. You know what I'm saying? It's a guided experience. For long-term Android users, for power users who expect more power user features, utilitarian features. They may switch to a Pixel and think, wow, this is kind of stripped down a little bit. This is kind of bare bones. But for an iPhone user, they might switch over and think, yeah, this is simple. I understand how to use this really fairly easily. I feel like I'm still at home, but I'm not on an iPhone anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think Google is just straight up trying to one-to-one copy Apple and their iPhones. I think that when you use a Pixel device, there's still plenty of Google stuff on board. There's lots of little experimental things that Google is known for. They love making weird new features. But I think when taken in as a whole, when people sit back and they say, why hasn't Google delivered feature XYZ? The answer is because they don't value it. They don't see it as an important feature to capture the customers that they are targeting, to capture the customers that they're trying to get. And those customers, very likely, if you're asking that question, just isn't you. And honestly, that's fine because the Z Fold does exist. The OnePlus Open does exist. Those phones are made, if you're that person, for you. But I think at a certain point, when we watch Google marching down a particular path for several years now, it might start to be time to stop asking them why they're not doing X, Y, and Z, when I think that it's because they're just choosing not to. They're going another direction. And if we're being honest, it's starting to work. So guys, this is probably one of those videos where the moment that I click publish, I'm probably going to think of 4 or 5 things that I should have said differently or details that I should have added that would have supported what I'm trying to say better. But I think that I've at least presented my case well enough. And I do want to let you know, this is not me like defending Google in any way, okay? So like there are features that I want. Like I would love to have floating windows on my Pixel 9 Pro Fold, but evidently that's a feature that they value less than the other things that they are working on and delivering. It's very similar to that third app in split screen. They just don't seem to think that it matters enough to have delivered it already. So I'm not defending them. What I'm doing is I am describing to you what I think is happening and what the rationale is. But I do want to hear from you guys down below. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm onto something with this? Do you think Google is onto something with this strategy? Personally, I think that they are. I think that this is actually a relatively smart thing for them to be doing, as the reasons I have already given you, I think, relatively well support that take. Guys, thanks for watching, though. I'll see you on the next one. Subscribe for more content just like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.